Hey, before I kick off the podcast, I just want to shout out Next Door Clothing. Next Door, a clothing brand based out of Bondi in Sydney. They're making really nice jeans and shirts and hats. So go and check out their full range at nextdoorsydney.com. They're also artists, so you can go and check out a range of art. They put on rad parties, and I love what they're doing. So nextdoorsydney.com for the full range.
I'm having a good time.
You are?
Yeah.
I can tell.
And we are rolling too.
Terrible happy talks. Terrible happy talks. Terrible happy talks. Terrible happy talks. Ready, brother?
I'm ready.
All right. Today's guest is Aaron Cross. Aaron is a husband, father, fisherman, firefighter, outdoorsman, surfer, and Jiu-Jitsu enthusiast. Aaron advocates for the empowerment of communities through emergency medical training, a skill set he acquired during his time as a firefighter and rafting guide in the Grand Canyon. Aaron was the first member of his family to attend college and graduated from the University of Portland with a bachelor's degree in science and history. Aaron's immediate humility is what originally attracted me to him. On the exterior, he is your stereotypical man's man, but moreover, he is someone that listens, someone who is sincere with his words. He thinks deeply about his place and purpose in this world, and he loves to go fishing. Prior to this episode, I asked Aaron what he regards as his life's most notable achievements, and he highlighted a long and happy marriage, fathering his 3 amazing children, and his profound relationship with his grandfather. Excited about the second half of his life, Aaron is with me today to share his journey, experiences, challenges, and hopes for the future. Aaron Cross, welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. It's good to be here, and I loved hearing that read back, man. Thank you for that. And I only have one tiny correction. That is that I attended Portland State University, go Vikings, and not the University of Portland, which is another fine institution, but just not the one I went to.
So sorry.
Not at all.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. I'll make that correction on the show notes.
Awesome.
But brother,
yeah,
dude, like university, like so you're pretty like you miss those days or what?
No. I don't miss those days. I'm really grateful for those days, you know. But I think such a challenge in life is not living in the past or living in the future and being present, you know, and it's much easier to say that than to do that. But I definitely think back fondly on those days and consider them some of the happiest of my life. And but I wouldn't trade places with that young man.
You know, like you mentioned the Vikings.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of pride there still, isn't there?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
American football or basketball? Excuse my ignorance. Like, what are the Vikings?
The Vikings are the university mascot of Portland State University. And when I was there, we didn't yet have a men's basketball team. So it was football. American football, and we would go out and if there was an early game, myself and my friends that were in my fraternity, we would protest an early game, early being like 10 a.m., heaven forbid, by attending the game in our pajamas.
Nice.
So, yeah, win-win.
Sure thing.
Comfort.
Did you play yourself?
I did play flag football, 2 championships, once as an undergraduate and once as a much older man. I was like 25 during my second championship season. Nice. So flag football was about as rough and tumble as I got. Yeah.
Keeps your body in check as well, like the injury factor and the head injuries are heavy in gridiron.
Yeah. The concussion thing. It's a really guilty pleasure for me now to watch any American football because it's such a spectacle and it's so fun. It's so perfect for television. But just the fact that you're just watching brain damage happen in real time that's really, really hard.
It is, man. And it's funny because in Australia, rugby union and rugby league are really big sports in our country, and they tackle as well. And there's constant tackling, and they obviously have a range of head issues, and head injuries occur, and they've regulated the game to make it safer for the players. But the hits aren't as big as gridiron. You know, and I think that's the big decisive factor. I think something about gridiron and the speed that those guys run and just the sheer brute force that they put on each other.
Yeah.
It happens in rugby league, but it's more like I think it's less big hits is the big key.
Yeah.
But yeah, did you see that movie Concussion with Will Smith?
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Based on a true story.
Right. Yeah. Former Pittsburgh Steelers who, when I was a kid, I was born in 1972. And at the end of the 1970s, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys had this huge rivalry. And so there's a lot of people from my generation that are very fond of either the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Dallas Cowboys. And that was some of those Pittsburgh Steelers that had those injuries. And there's not a helmet that's going to stop that, right? It's just physics. You're going this way, I'm going that way. We run into each other. And
Yeah, exactly. It's that rattling of the brain, isn't it?
Yeah, devastating.
Yeah, I guess it would taint watching the game for me as well, I think.
Yeah. And there are people that have grown up with that game, and and like I say, it's fun to watch. It's super fun to play, but just having those subconcussive hits over and over and over. You mentioned rugby, right? And my son actually played a fair amount of soccer, and these are games where you're running one direction, the other team's running the other, right? And you just you hit. But I heard a great expression not too long ago that soccer is the game where people spend an hour pretending that they're hurt, and rugby is a game that people spend an hour pretending they're not hurt.
Don't get me started on this. I have this argument so much, especially in Australia, because soccer is regarded as a it's not a man's sport, because it's not like Australian football or AFL or rugby league where they're tackling. But I keep telling people, and as a soccer player myself growing up, it's soccer players aren't trying to be tough. Those fouls and those rolling, the theatrics of it, it's part of the art of the game.
Right.
And I know it must be hard to watch when you see someone barely get touched and they throw themselves on the ground and holding their leg going,
Yeah.
But I've actually, it's such a strategic move, and there's an art to that.
Yeah.
There's an art to throwing yourself on the ground.
Yeah, calling attention to what has happened, right? Just it make it easier for the ref to see, I guess.
But what it does too, I feel that it breeds better refereeing. And in my opinion, some of these big like rugby league, rugby union, American football, where they keep referring to the video referee all the time. Yeah. I feel like it's disempowered referees.
Yeah.
And they're scared to make a decision.
Right.
Whereas in soccer or football, the real football, they can't just refer to the video referee for decisions. So I feel like it's a skill set then is then passed down the generations, and they have these families of really good referees. But the big problem in Australia, again referring back to rugby league, is there's so much complaining about referee decisions nowadays in sport, and I just think it's because referees have lost their confidence and the skill set has become lost because of technology.
Yeah. Another tool in the toolbox, right? But it's amazing how often they get it right. And when you see those slow motion reviews or what the camera saw versus what the ref saw, and you're like, man, that's a good call.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. But it's when the referee still makes the wrong call, even with the video referee, that's when riots start.
Yeah, that's when people start tipping cars over.
Are you a passionate sports watcher?
No.
You're not that guy?
No.
You don't have to get up at 2 a.m. to catch that game?
No. I did watch the Super Bowl here, which was fun, and there have been many seasons in probably the past 10 years where the Super Bowl was the only game I caught that year. My favorite team is the Green Bay Packers, which is in Wisconsin, like the Midwest part of the United States, because back home in Portland, Oregon, the state, which is on the West Coast just north of California, there is no professional football team there. Seattle, Washington does, and that's pretty close, like a 3-hour drive from Portland, the Seattle Seahawks. So there are a lot of Seattle Seahawks fans that are from Portland, Oregon. And then, of course, those Dallas Cowboys and Pittsburgh Steelers fans we talked about earlier. But you kind of get a chance to kind of shop around for your favorite team. And I love that the Green Bay Packers is the only team in the National Football League that's owned by the community, right? It's just meaningful. And they won a ton of championships. They had this amazing coach named Vince Lombardi. And when you win the Super Bowl, if you win it today, the trophy that you're hoisting up is the Lombardi Trophy.
So it's got a really like rich history.
Yes.
And you're attracted to that.
Yeah, very much so. I love the idea of community, and you've probably heard of the comedian Jerry Seinfeld, right? He's very famous and just so awesome. And I remember he had this comedy bit where he's talking about how there was a time when if you went to go see the Chicago Bears, probably a bunch of those guys were from Chicago. They're like local guys. Or Pittsburgh, they're from Pittsburgh. And now, because of just how things are set up and everybody's going everywhere, you're basically rooting for laundry.
Right.
Because they're just
like whatever the jersey is.
Yeah, whatever, just rooting for laundry. I just love that, you know. So it's true. But with the Green Bay Packers, of course, there's that real community element. And it's on my bucket list. I haven't done it yet, but I will see a game at the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field, which is where they play.
No way. That would be a great spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, in Australia, it's like, well, you have to support the team from the area that you grew up in. And if you don't, well, then you're a hoax. You're a joke. You're not a real sports fan.
Yeah.
But that has changed across, like, all variety of sports people. It's funny, like the infiltration of money and big corporations into sport.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you mentioned that movie Concussion, and you know whether or not someone's at all interested in American football. I learned a lot about concussions from watching that movie, but I also was really turned off by just how much. I mean, that's a huge financial machine, the National Football League back home, and just that. You know, I don't want to say they don't have regard for the health of their players, but I just loved what was pointed out that by the time you make it to that elite level, you've already taken, whether or not you've had major concussions or not, you've already taken thousands of subconcussive hits. And having suffered a concussion myself at least once that was confirmed, I just know how debilitating that is on the person. In the immediate aftermath of it, and just how slow it is to come back online. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah,
I've had the same. I've had a few concussions, and it takes a long time where you're just really a little bit like you're okay, you can function, do your normal daily activities, but you just feel a little bit vague and a little bit fuzzy, and depends on the severity, obviously.
Yeah,
but it's real deal.
Yeah, sensitivity to light, low grade headache. Lack of concentration, mood swings. Yeah. I mean, I would say I had all of that within 24 hours of my injury, and then it just took a long time for things to come back around. I was early in my career as a professional firefighter, and I had just made it out of academy. And so it was like my first major landmark. You know, now I'm going on the line to really do the job as a what's called a probationary firefighter. Back home in the States, if you are hired as a professional firefighter, you're put on probation for your first year. And so in the process of that, you're hired, you come on board, you're issued all your personal protective equipment. And you go into academy, and so you're practicing the skills over and over and over and over, and it's hard. You know, I think it was 9 weeks for us. I came out of that in the best shape of my life, and I went into it feeling like I was in good shape, right? Which, as a quick aside, there's always that dichotomy, right? Of there's the shape that you think you're in, and there's the shape that you're in, right? And there was a bit of a disconnect there for me, but no, I was feeling really good. I was chosen to speak at the academy commencement ceremony kind of thing, and I was just really in a good place and walking a couple inches off of the ground. And I went out drinking with a couple of my buddies that I'd known from high school, and had way too much to drink, and we were walking back to my van only to call a taxi from there, because we could sit in the van and wait for the taxi to come. Well, right next to where I was parked, there was an outdoor basketball hoop. And not even thinking at all about it, I ran and jumped and done what I've done many, many times, which is I grabbed the net. I'm 6'3" tall, but I can't grab the rim. I might be able to touch it, but I'm not hanging there. And when I grabbed the net, my body kind of swung out near horizontal. And, you know, this is going right, the net ripped. And so I dropped my full height plus my massive vertical leap of 4 to 6 inches, you know, whatever it was. But if it was just my height, that would be plenty. and I came down, and I was near flat, and I think probably my butt hit first, but then my shoulders and the back of my head. And just really knocked me out.
Yep.
For a moment. My friends came over because it made a horrible sound. I feel so sorry for my friends that had to hear that sound because I didn't hear it. And they ran over to me, and they said just my eyes rolled back in my head, and I lost consciousness for a couple of seconds. And then I came to pretty much right away, and I was back. I did, it was one of those times, Shannon, where my medical training kind of worked against me to a degree. That is to say that I asked my friends, like, do you see anything coming out of my ears? No. Do you see anything coming out of my nose? No. Are my pupils the same size? Yes. Like, guys, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Self-diagnosed.
Yeah. And altered mental status too, right? Like when there's a reason why if you come across a patient who has been drinking and I would say well shy of the amount that I had consumed that night, which was just like one of those once every couple years ridiculousness, right? That you just presume consent upon that person because if they were not altered mental status, inebriated in that way, they would of course say, yes, please render care. So I got in a taxi, I went home, and I was getting home late, and I said to my wife, hey, just kind of keep an eye on me, would you? Because I hit my head pretty hard. And she said, should we go to the hospital? I said, no. I got up in the night and I threw up, and I tracked. I thought at the time, I had too much to drink. And again, that would be very rare that I would ever, even at that time in my life, drink to the point where I was throwing up. But I thought if there was ever a time, this is one of those times. And I wasn't thinking, I wasn't going down the concussion path. So I woke up in the morning, splitting headache, extreme sensitivity to light. And I went into the hospital emergency room. My mom came over to be with the kids. My wife took me into the emergency room, and they asked what had happened, and they said, okay, well, hey, we're gonna put you on the machine to check for a possible skull fracture.
CAT scan.
Yeah. And so I go into the big machine, and when I came out of the machine, the tech put his hand on my chest and said, don't move. You got a skull fracture, and we're going to put a neck brace on you. And I said, I'm a regular, because, I know what size I take on having trained with those so many times.
I'll get the regular, please, in the neck braces.
Can I get the regular? And he told me I had a skull fracture, and the neurosurgeon comes in. And Shannon, it really scared me because I thought, wow, they're about to drill holes in my skull to relieve pressure. Like that is a possible outcome of what's happening here.
Swelling, brain swelling.
Yeah. It can't swell out, right? Because your skull is like this fixed compartment, and it really scared me. So that was my by far worst concussion. My skull fracture ended up being 2 inches tall, the back of my skull, as you might imagine, down kind of low. But
in terms of swelling at the back of your skull? In
terms of the fracture itself, the break in the skull was about 2 inches long and just like imperceptible in width. I was back working as a professional firefighter 1 week later.
Okay.
Yeah.
But was there still you still weren't 100% after a week?
In hindsight, I was definitely not
Probably
100%. And because I was a probationary firefighter, and because I very much didn't want to be missing any shifts, I just made the best possible case to my doctor to sign the release, and he did. And he said, I'll release you, but you got to wear your helmet, of course, every time. Yeah. So, but spooky stuff. Man.
I don't mess with head injuries. Just going back to what you were saying, like in regards to how you did it. As a PE teacher over the years, I've seen numerous injuries from exactly that. There was one in particular, my very first one, and it was the exact same thing. There was a kid, he didn't have the basketball in his hand, but he just wanted to jump up and touch the rim. So he ran, sort of half touched it and just sort of like curled his fingertips around the rim, and then it actually gave him a bit of swing and then fell back and again put him horizontal in the air.
Yeah.
And then put his hand down to stop. And I was at the other end of the basketball court.
Yeah.
I seen it all unfold. It was like slow motion.
Yeah.
And you could hear the snapping sound of his forearm.
Yeah.
As clear as day. And I'll never forget. The kid's name was Amuway. There you go. I forget his background exactly, but his name was Amuway. And this other kid, his name was Justin Barr. He said, "Hey, Shannon, Amuway's hurt himself." And then he went quiet and he went, "Bad." And I look up and he stands up. He's in shock. And there's like a proper 90-degree angle in his forearm. Yeah. And he just went straight into shock, and then we managed it. But
golly.
I mean, and then I've seen it even recently, students trying to do that. And and another one is I've seen a kid try to do it and his finger got caught in the netting and just like a degloving. Have you heard of the deglove?
Yes.
Not too major, but where he actually it scraped the skin off from his knuckle to his fingertip and took the skin off to the bone.
Yeah,
man.
Rugged. I actually just very recently. Well, my wedding ring was pretty much the only piece of jewelry that I wore, right? And when I started training jiu-jitsu, about maybe like a year into that journey, I started training more in the gi, right? Which is like what people think of when they think of like somebody's doing karate or something, right? They have the belt. It's the pajama party, right? So, but part of the training is grippings, right? So like I'm gripping your lapel, I'm gripping your
like
cuffs.
Grappling?
Yeah,
or gripping
very,
and grappling?
Very much like grappling jiu-jitsu. And I'm still very much a beginner with jiu-jitsu, but I was making that very entry-level mistake of like counting too much on my grips, and I had some swelling in my wedding ring finger, and so I was on vacation with my family, and I woke up and I was like, "Oh man, this is uncomfortable. I can't get my wedding ring off." I tried all the tricks. I did I'll try water, I'll try soap and water, I'll try the dental floss trick, on and on it goes. Could not get it off. Got really close, could not get it off, and I ultimately had to have my wedding ring cut off. And so I've since switched to like the silicone, like the rubber wedding ring. But I lost it the other day surfing. So, but the degloving thing is just like horrendous. And you mentioned your student who had broken his arm, and I'll just say as an aside that I'm okay with the blood and gut stuff, man, but deformity still gives me pause, right? It's just like the body's supposed to look a certain way, and when there's a 90-degree angle, it's not supposed to be there. It's like, oh, dear. Yeah.
And I've found, since I've had some pretty horrific injuries myself, I've become way more sensitive. And I've also been on the scene of a few serious first aid situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm becoming much more sensitive to blood and guts and deformity. Like I just don't want to see it. Like even in movies now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm just aging and getting soft in my old age, but I don't know. It is hard to look at.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe we could think of that as an increase in our capacity to have empathy for others. As a positive, right? Like, when you see that, it's like, oh man, if that was me seeing that on my body, that would give me pause. I would be concerned and upset about that kind of thing.
I think that's the best analysis. Maybe I've developed empathy and don't realize.
Hey man, there's hope for all of us, right?
I don't know if there's hope for me, Aaron. I don't know, man.
Oh, for sure, man.
Speaking of empathy, did you know? Like, what was it like being in the Bourne movies, Bourne Supremacy?
Oh, you know what? I'm so glad you bring that up.
How was it being like Jason Bourne's nemesis?
I want to watch that movie. I've never seen that movie. I read one of his books years ago, Page Turner. Man, I love it. Aaron Cross. That's his name. Christina the photographer who's here, and she goes by Christina the photographer. So. She's a human. What a great middle and last name for a photographer.
Her is a middle name.
Yeah.
Her and I were laughing about it over coffee. She's like, does he know that he's got the same name as the guy from the Bourne movies?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Dude,
yeah,
you're a big deal.
I like the symmetry of my name. There's 2 A's at the beginning and 2 S's at the end, right? There's
similar.
5 letters in both, and I've got 2 letters in my middle name too, Lee, L-E-E. I don't know. I just... Dude, as a handle, it's okay.
Dude, does anyone ever... Aaron Lee Cross, is that your middle name?
Yeah, that's the middle.
It's a good, strong name, Aaron.
It was my mother's middle name. It is my mother's middle name. It's my father's middle name, and it was my grandpa's middle name. Lee.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Does anyone ever mispronounce your first name and call you Aaron?
all the time.
Hey,
I
Aaron.
love that. I love that
Have you
Key and
seen
Peele
that?
bit.
Have you
I've
seen that
it-
skit?
I've probably seen that
Oh
thing
my
50 times, and I
God.
laugh like an idiot every
Dude.
single time. It's so hilarious.
And as a teacher, like, they just did it so well. That's exactly what happens with some teachers.
Yeah, just the volcano, right? Just like, wow.
That's what working in the public system does to teachers, mate.
Yeah. Yeah,
Makes
I
us-
just love
makes
it when
them on edge.
you will feel my wrath. Like, wow, okay, all right. He's setting expectations.
I love it. He goes, "You done messed up, hey, Aaron."
Yeah, all time. I love that. Yeah, I love that. Well, I will
Jack?
say if you're from the West Coast of the United States, my name
Yeah.
is Aaron.
Okay.
If you're from the East Coast of the United States, like New York, Long Island, it's Aaron.
Sounds Australian,
Aaron.
mate. It sounds like you're from Australia.
Yeah,
Australia.
I don't know, but my wife has the same name, Erin, but she's Erin. So again, it's the same name on the West Coast, but if we're on the East Coast,
Yeah,
you know who they're talking to.
you
Hey,
go.
Aaron. Yeah, I turn my head, but
Is that like when you say the East Coast, we're talking Boston, New York?
I was thinking New York.
New
Yeah,
York.
yeah. Back at Portland State University, I had a dear friend that worked in student government with me, and she was from Long Island. And I just love how, I'm sure you would totally know this too. Like different parts of Australia, people just sound differently, right?
Dude.
Like almost different countries. Almost.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
What's your favorite accent in the world? Come on.
Ooh, favorite
Putting you on the
accent
spot.
in the world.
Come on, there's got to be one.
Man, I'll go with Spanish.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, so
Actually,
good.
more specifically, Basque.
Oh,
So the
okay.
Basque region, have you heard of that?
I have,
Which is
yeah.
on the border between
Ancient
France and
people,
Spain.
yeah.
And they've got their own language, dialect, and they call it the most beautiful language on earth. And I can see why.
Lovely.
It's just like the way they have to pronounce words and what it does to their facial muscles and expressions as they say it. And then the people in that area have a real passion for art and food and culture. And it's just
Yeah.
like, it's the whole package, bro.
Yeah, language is so fascinating in that way because, like, when you learn someone else's language, you're learning to a degree how they think about the world, like, right? Because
Yeah,
I heard this great
totally.
expression some years ago that words are a very wide net to go fishing for thoughts with, right? So
Love that.
yeah. You think about someone who's a great writer, and you're reading, like, man, he or she just nailed that. That is so beautiful. But if you don't have just what the words are, and you can build onto that, like the person's facial expression, what they're doing with their hands, etc. That there's so much more. But you get that glimpse of like the whole idea of male and female, right? Like, well, what is it about the sea that's male or female? It's just the sea is just the sea, right? Or what is it about this other thing that's you say L instead of la, or it's pretty cool. And if you're just taking that on from the time that you're cognitive enough as a 3 or 4 month old baby or whatever this threshold hits where gibberish is gibberish and your native language is your native language. You're like, oh, I've heard this before. That's my name, whatever. And you're just hearing those messages. Maybe you do start thinking of things as male and female. I mean, how could you not, right? So,
Yeah.
But just in terms of like how it sounds, love the Spanish, man.
It is
Yeah,
cool.
so
man.
good.
Do you speak any other languages?
I speak a little bit of Spanish, just I would say vacation Spanish. I had one semester of Spanish in high school.
Okay.
I wish I could remember the teacher's name, but
Yeah.
he played an honest-to-God record player, and he would just like
Love
drop
him.
the needle on,
Yeah.
and you'd hear the guy go, por ejemplo, for example, por ejemplo. And then he'd say something, you'd hear a lady talk back and forth with them, and I think I
man.
squeaked by with a C, man. And then I started going to Mexico every spring break in college.
Cancun.
No, not Cancun for us
Baja.
because we're West Coast. Yeah,
Oh.
Baja Peninsula.
Been to Baja Peninsula.
Yeah, love it.
La Paz.
Didn't make it as far south as La Paz because we were driving. We went to Ensenada.
I know Ensenada.
Yeah, 70 miles-ish south of the border below Tijuana.
Yep.
And then, so 2 spring breaks there. And then on the third one, we spent half the time in San Felipe, which is on the Sea of Cortez. It's amazing, beautiful.
Yeah.
And then the last year we only went to San Felipe.
There you go.
Yeah, it had slightly better weather. None of us were surfers at that time.
Yeah.
yeah, just great times. And so that gave me a chance to practice. I would just practice.
Yeah, it's so true. I agree. Like, you've got to live the language, you know. That's where I'm at with my Bahasa Indonesian. It's really improved, actually, lately. I've been getting lessons, but I'm just being really conscious of trying to use it every opportunity I get, you know. And I just really enjoy it. And I've said this a few times. I feel like what it's doing is it's literally working another part of my brain.
That's right.
And for some reason, I feel like that's actually making my mind work in creative ways that I've never known.
Yeah.
And I'm actually linking it back to the fact that I'm learning another language.
For sure.
Because I've never felt so creative in my life.
Outstanding.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, what a downstream benefit, right?
It is a downstream benefit.
Yeah.
And going back to what you were saying about Mexico and Baja Peninsula, oh man, that just conjured so many memories for me. I did a road trip from San Francisco all the way down the Pacific Coast Highway, down into Baja, and we went all the way down to the end of the peninsula, put the car on a ferry across the Sea of Cortez, which was amazing. Whales, and just really raw. I couldn't believe how raw it was. There was nothing out there. And then we drove on the mainland all the way down to a place called Puerto Escondido.
Yes, of course.
And we spent like 3 months doing it, just me and two friends. It was like, for me, out of a movie, and I reflect on those memories, and it's like I was just dreaming the whole time. Had no responsibilities, had not much money, and so that dictated a lot of our decisions.
Sure.
In a good way.
You
know? So it was fun, it was scary, it was raw, there was surfing, there was girls. I don't know.
Oh, well,
I don't know, man.
I love all those things.
Yeah.
But I'll say that, like, just being immersed in another language like that, immersed in another culture like that.
Like, no one spoke English.
You got no choice but to just limp along on what you've got, and you don't learn from your successes so much, right? Like, you say something wrong, and you know, with very few exceptions, I mean, like 99.9%, I would say that everyone in Mexico I've ever met that they're so patient with my complete butchering of their language, and just happy that I'm making the attempt, you know. And I think the reverence that I have for the language and the people comes through. But man, that lights up a different part of your brain, right? When you're just in a completely different environment like that.
Actually, I see a lot of similarities between the Balinese and the Mexican. Especially when you get out of the touristy areas, same thing. That patience, that tolerance, is really pronounced and just beautiful, and just their enjoyment of life and music and food.
Yes,
I love that.
Yes.
And I mean, I remember, like, in Mexico, they used to talk about, like, the siestas are a real thing. And they used to always say this thing like mañana, like tomorrow, like mañana. Like, it's always like, their whole philosophy is like, oh, we'll do it tomorrow, like really relaxed. And here in Bali, it's like, oh, they're on island time. And it can be really frustrating.
Sure.
When you want to get something done. But I also really respect it. There's just that taking things slow and enjoying the present moment.
Yeah, there's
not living in tomorrow.
No. There's that great Oscar Wilde quote, I think, right? He says, there's more to life than simply speeding it up. Right?
Dude.
It's like, just because you're going faster doesn't mean this is better, right?
Did Oscar Wilde just sit around writing like quotes and memes all day? Holy shit, that guy's got some good.
He's got a cannon. There's a cannon of good quotes there,
many
for
good
sure.
quotes. That
no
guy.
doubt. And I would just add to the whole Balinese / Mexico that or Mexican people, that I have like a very positive cultural stereotype of Mexico and Mexican people, namely that there's that real love and connection and real reverence for the family. And it's not at all uncommon to visit a family down there and find that, here are the parents, here are the kids, here is grandma and grandpa, and they're living in the same kind of compound. Yeah. And I just love that. I think of that as so good for the parents and the kids and the grandparents, and just like having those multiple generations under one roof, and how we've really lost that in the West. Have you heard that saying, it takes a village to raise a child? Oh, yeah, for sure. Do you feel that maybe that's being lost in where you're from and maybe westernized cultures and civilizations? Yes, I feel like to a huge degree that's been degraded, partly because of the movement away from having those multiple generations under the same roof or in the same compound. So you don't have grandma and grandpa there giving their insights, right? And you don't have the kids, whether grandpa and grandpa have it in them to offer insights or not. They're still there as like a living example or warning of what to do or not to do, and as an older person. But having families off on their own, just the parents and the kids, that's a different setup, right? And then just like the mistrust of strangers and what's that expression? A stranger is just someone I never met before, like a friend I never met before, right? So I think we're starting, I hope, to bring that back around, because I just heard not long ago that one of the first states passed a law where just because a kid is out on their own, walking home from school as an example, does not immediately mean that the parents are recklessly endangering that child, right? They're not negligent as parents because that kid is walking home from school by themselves. And, a lot of parts of the world, they'd be like, what? How could that possibly be considered anything other than just what happens? But that they call it free-range child laws. And I love that, just like, should be able to do that.
I like it because it kind of points the finger back on society. And
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, why should a child feel or be in danger for being by themselves?
Right.
Why?
Yeah. Middle of the afternoon.
Why isn't everyone looking out for that kid?
That's right. The village.
Flips it. I love it. Flips it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a step in the right direction for sure.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. Yeah, man. I'm just really thinking about languages for some reason. My mind keeps going back to that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a silly question. Like, my favorite language is, the Basque language
Mm-hmm.
and the accent.
Mm-hmm.
What's your least favorite accent? Doesn't have to be language, accent.
Okay. So accent,
put you on the spot.
accent that someone is speaking to me. They're speaking to me in English, but they have an accent.
There you go.
What?
Yeah. Accent.
Probably German.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, probably German. Yeah.
Because I've got one.
Okay, which one for you?
It's New Zealand, Kiwi.
New Zealand, okay.
And Australia and New Zealand have this really fun rivalry because we have similar accents, but it's really just slightly different. But it's enough to cause sporting rivalries and,
Ooh, yeah.
people giving shit to each other at the pub.
Yeah.
I think it's like Canada and USA.
I was thinking
that really
exactly
fun sort of
that.
rivalry.
I was thinking exactly that because I asked someone recently. I can't remember if they were Australian or Kiwi. Like, how do you know? No, they were Australian. And he said it's the number 6 that a person from New Zealand will say sucks. Yeah, right? So that's like a tell.
Or sex.
And for us with...
They say sex.
They say sex.
They say sex.
Okay, now I know. But for the United States and Canada, right, we would say about, and a person from Canada would say a boot.
A boot.
Yeah.
Oot and a boot.
And it's just, it's probably like that. It's just that little, a small irritation. We're like, oh, you said it wrong. Like, no, you didn't say it. They just say it how they said it, But it's enough to throw you.
It just makes me laugh every time, And it's funny, I was traveling around Sri Lanka with my wife years ago, and we met this awesome Kiwi couple that we just hung out with, And Jade pulled me aside. She's like, Shannon, I know you like making fun of the Kiwi accent, but please, don't. Sometimes people get offended. I'm like, all right. And I went out to dinner with them, and I said to this Kiwi girl, I said, oh, I really like you. That's a really nice necklace. It's a beautiful necklace you're wearing. And she started laughing. Her and her boyfriend started laughing, and I went, what are you laughing at? And they went, you said necklace. And I went, what do you mean? Like you said, no. She goes, no. She goes, necklace. I love, that's so funny how you guys say that. And I said, what do you mean? That's the right way to say it. Yeah. She's like, I'm like, what do you say? She's like, Nicholas, Nicholas or something like that, like Nicholas.
Just different enough.
And I was like, see, they're doing it to us. We sound funny too. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'll just give one more example of this because languages are really fun. When my wife and I were married, we visited Italy, Turkey, and Greece. And
cool.
it was so cool. And the fact that we were married 4 days after the 9/11, and flash forward 10 days, we're in a Muslim majority country for the first time, and hearing the call to prayer and being surrounded by people who were, raised in the faith of Islam, and couldn't have been more lovely. But I remember there were these twin brothers that worked at the hotel that we stayed at, that they were servers at the restaurant, and they had so much fun with the way we as Americans say water. They're like, "Can I have some water? Get some water." And they just put them in stitches. I just never thought of that. But of course, someone speaking the Queen's English, they would say water.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
Don't you find it funny how self-centered we are, really? Myself, I'm definitely referring to myself here the most. It's like we just think the way we do things is the right way.
Clearly.
Yeah. And that's why I think traveling's so profound.
So good.
Because of those little situations. And again, a girl from New Zealand making fun of how I say necklace just brought me right back down to earth. Went, hey, I'm not the center of the universe. And I need those reminders. And it can't, and it's always in the most subtle ways.
Yeah. Well, and you nailed it. I was just thinking of there's a band called Fishbone. And years ago, they had an album, and the title was "Give a Monkey a Brain, and He'll Swear He's the Center of the Universe."
Yeah,
isn't that true? Yeah, and when you travel, right, you get that challenge of being confronted with different ways of doing innumerable things, and isn't it tempting to fall into judgment and say they're doing it wrong? They should be doing it like we do it. This is wrong. And different isn't necessarily wrong, right? It's a good reminder, man. Yeah,
it so is, bro. It so is. Now, Aaron, I want to go back a little bit to where you grew up. So you're from Oregon, the state.
Yep.
And the city is Portland.
Yep.
For those that aren't sure, and you grew up in, say, suburban Portland.
I grew up in the inner city.
Inner city.
Yeah. So very close.
So you're a city boy.
Yeah. And I grew up in northeast Portland, which is for me kind of like the center of the universe. But in addition, it's also more or less the geographic center of Portland.
Cool.
And I love where I'm from.
Yeah, cool, man. And so you went to elementary school and stuff, in the inner city, and
I did.
How do you reflect on those early days, those early childhood days of going to school in the inner city? And
extremely positive. Yeah, I was really fortunate. I have a sister who's 2.5 years my senior, and so when it was time for school, she and I walked out our front door, and we walked the 4, 5, 6 blocks to our elementary school, and we took the same route more or less each time, and we're walking along, and we're seeing the same friends, and it was always a nice commute, if you will, ramping up and coming back. So I loved that, and I was very fortunate I got to do that in elementary school, and I also got to do it in what we call middle school. So for us, that'd be 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Junior high is how it's kind of referred to some.
Yeah.
And then when it came time for high school, I was on the city bus. So I'd
cool.
get on the bus and head over to Benson Tech. Go Tech, man.
And would you say you're a good student?
No.
Why? No. Why?
No, I didn't need much time to think about that.
For some reason, I don't believe that.
Well, I was thinking about this a little bit because I admire you as a teacher, and I feel like I have some skill when it comes to teaching because I know how hard it can be to learn, especially 100%. When you are going into something with this mindset of I'm just not good at this. Math jumps to mind, right? A lot of people say, I'm just not good at math, or later they'll say, I'm just not good with money. And it's they've kind of just kind of thrown in the towel with regard to this area of their life, whatever. But if you can lower those barriers of resistance and just, hey, this is normal, feel this way. Surfing is another thing, right? We were talking about that fear of the ocean, that healthy respect, which can be fear of the ocean, and just helping to minimize that. So I don't mean to dance around your question here, Shannon. I realized after I lost my job as a professional firefighter. I made it to the 11.5-month mark, right? And they let me go, said that I had failed probation, which hurt because I just scored a 97% on my written final, and I showed up that day to take my practical final to demonstrate my skills, basically, and I felt really ready. Mm-hmm. Instead, I got taken in and let go. It felt like a small death at the time, but after that happened, maybe like a year later, my wife and I were having a really challenging time in our relationship. And I'm very fortunate to have a wife that is willing to work on things and look at things. And for us, part of that was meeting with a couples therapist. And she asked the same question, like, well, how did you do in school? And I said, I really struggled, you know. And she said, well, how did you struggle? I said, well, I would just kind of compare myself to my friends, and I would think, gosh, I'm putting in at least as much effort as he is or she is, and my results are just not matching up with the amount of horsepower that I'm putting into this. And I wasn't a disruptive student. I wasn't trying to be the class clown. I wasn't throwing things in class or shooting rubber bands or anything. I was just a daydreamer. You know, I'd be the guy staring out the window during math class, which is not what you want to do in math class, right? You miss one step in math, and there's no dancing around
playing
that.
Catch up.
Yeah.
And then,
or not.
And then if you're constantly playing catch up, young people, I seem to see, give up if they feel like they're playing catch up on content.
Yeah.
Anyway, I could go deep in this, but anyway.
For sure. Well, the
Is that what happened to you, though?
Yeah, that was very, very much what happened to me. Was I felt like with math, I was well behind the curve most of the time, and I would just eke out these passing grades, like just eke them out with a lot of effort, you know. And so I'm talking with the couples therapist about this, and she looks at me and she's like, well, you know, I'm not qualified to make this diagnosis or anything, but when I hear you talk about this, I just think ADHD. And I had heard of ADHD, of course, but I always thought about the H, you know, the hyperactive, and I'm not hyperactive. Maybe I'm mentally hyperactive. I'd sometimes give the comparison. I'm like a duck. You know, you see a duck on the water, on the surface of water, and it's just like, oh, look how graceful that duck is, just gliding along. But under the surface, right there is just all the legs are going crazy. And so I said, well, okay, you're not qualified to make that diagnosis. How does that diagnosis get made? And I started reading about ADHD or ADD, and I was like, man, maybe this is worth a look. And so I went, and it was I met with a psychologist who part of her speciality is testing people for ADHD. It's like a whole battery of tests. So I was basically testing to fail, right? You start out with, okay, I'm going to tell you a story, and I want you to repeat the details that you can remember after I tell you it. And then I'm going to give you a bunch of shapes, and I want you to make a diamond pattern out of these shapes, like all these things, and they just get progressively harder and harder. You're not passing this test, by the way. The whole idea is you're showing how far you can go before you're just at wit's end, basically. So I had smoke coming out of my ears by the end of the day. There was a lunch break, thank God. But long story short, as a 40-year-old, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and so I have ADHD, and when I got the diagnosis, I took it kind of hard at first. I felt like, well, there's something wrong with me. The word disorder is right in there, right? And then with some time and some reflection and more reading and just learning more, I just realized, well, this is just part of me, right? God doesn't make mistakes. It's just like, this is what I showed up with, and in some ways it's a really beautiful thing, and in other ways it can be really a challenging thing. But it boosted my awareness, and it was a big help to know.
Did it assist in finding some closure on things from the past in regards to maybe things or incidents or situations that you're involved in, and maybe you were still carrying some maybe regret or shame or remorse?
For sure, it did, yes. And at that time, the very recent example was being released from the fire department.
Do you mind going a bit deeper into that as to why?
Well, yeah.
You don't have to.
No. I'm happy to and comfortable talking about that. Of course, it's part of my journey, and I think what happened there for me was, and not to get caught up in that very entry level trap of comparison, but I didn't have prior firefighting experience, and I did have my EMT certification, which I'd gotten partly as a way to increase my ability to get a job as a professional firefighter in the first place. That was kind of a minimum standard. So if you can come in with that, that's a help rather than getting hired and then getting that. So that was part of the process of getting going. And I felt really good about my skills as an emergency medical technician, but I didn't know anything about professional firefighting. And the other members of my recruit class, great guys, all with zero exceptions, all had volunteered somewhere before. They'd gone through academy. They'd gotten firefighting certifications, and firefighter 1 is an example of one. Firefighter 2 is another. These are like you've demonstrated all these skills, etc. And so for me, during that probationary year, even though I felt really good about how things went in academy, there were just things that would happen even during academy that were very difficult. I'll give the example of the ladders. Okay.
Let's go.
Okay. So a ladder, there are different kinds of ladders, but basically you take the ladder off the fire engine and you put it up against a wall. How hard could that possibly be? Well, turns out it can be pretty hard.
Is that because there's a very strict protocol?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a reason, there's a why behind every bit of that. And I will say now I really love ladders, but I'll take the example of the one that was most difficult for me. It was the 35-foot extension ladder. And the 35-foot extension ladder is very, very heavy. It's a 2-man throw. So you and I would be taking it off of the fire engine. You and I would be walking towards the building.
I'm not strong enough.
Well, you're totally strong.
Okay.
You nail this.
Sorry, keep going.
And there are just all of these little steps that go from taking it off the engine to putting it up against the wall, right?
I get it.
And you got to have all of them. It's like this choreographed thing. And when it goes well, it's so beautiful. But it was really difficult for me to master that skill set to the point where I went and got a ladder that happened to be over at this little house that we owned at the time, and I strapped it to the top of my van, and like on the way home I would stop and practice just the 1-man throw with this light ladder over and over and over. Yeah. So learning that.
Was it the sequencing of the protocols?
It was that, and it was the, like, I would get this feeling of overwhelm. That expression, you can't see the forest for the trees, right? It's like if I had that tree like right in front of my nose, I couldn't see the forest, and I didn't have any of that muscle memory built up. And this is a city. I was a professional firefighter for the city of Vancouver, Washington, which is very close to Portland, just on the other side of the major river called the Columbia River. And I mean, these guys did not have time. The city did not have time for me to figure this out. So I was doing it on my own, like between shifts, after just like practice. Yeah. And I would get a little test anxiety too. Like I showed up ready for that practical final, but I had other practical tests that showed that when it came to those kinds of skills, it was that I was challenged by them. And I didn't make a secret of it either. I would like seek out extra repetitions during training. It's like, hey, I'd like to be in the remedial group, please. I'd like you to talk to me like I'm 2, really? Just like, let's slow this down, and not, because there's a certain implied or assumed level of aptitude, which I just did not have. And so I felt like, I was not a perfect firefighter. I'm not a perfect man. I do feel that the city of Vancouver made a mistake in letting me go, and I said that during my exit interview, etc. But it turned out to be a really good thing in my life.
Why?
Because it made me appreciate a number of things that I didn't know going into it. Right. Just like coming here to Bali, there's like the Bali of my imagination, and then there's Bali. And similarly, there's the life of a professional firefighter in my imagination, and then there's the life that a professional firefighter actually lives.
So would it be safe to say that you chose to grow through it? So like after you had that news, which would have been unfavourable at the time, how did you choose to digest the news? Did you fall into a slump, curl up into the fetal position and cry yourself to sleep?
Yes.
Which is completely okay for a period?
Totally.
Or did you decide to pick yourself up, dust yourself off and see what the lesson was in it?
Yeah, ultimately, yes, I did that. But
You
at
went
the
through
start, it was devastating.
You went through some pain.
Yeah, definitely, because it felt like a small death in a way.
Yeah.
Because I had kind of externalized this identity as a firefighter, and when that was taken away, not by my choosing, it felt devastating. It felt like a failure. I have failed, right? And the assistant chief who let me go said, well, you failed probation. I'm like, oh, And so there was a lot of pain and hurt there. I remember having a conversation with one of my recruit classmates, and I was crying. And
Feelings of shame?
yeah, oh, for sure. Feelings of shame and embarrassment and, gosh, can I really start over? I've already put my family through so much. Because I had been essentially self-employed for like 11 years before I became a professional firefighter. And I was setting my own schedule, and we were going off to vacations without asking anybody's permission, et cetera. And then compare that with, okay, it's 24 hours on, it's 48 hours off, it's 24 hours on.
You're answering to someone?
Absolutely, in a very structured, somewhat paramilitary organization. And I just have huge respect for firefighters and what they do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, at the start there, it was really, really hard.
But now, years later, in
Yeah.
hindsight,
Yeah.
You've got 20/20 vision on it.
Yep. Best possible
I
thing
was
that
going
could
to say,
happen.
zero
Yeah.
go-
Best
There's-
thing that could happen.
There's a really cool saying that I love, and it says, "What you go through, you grow through."
Oh, nice.
And I really like it. I really do believe that the best lessons are learnt sometimes through suffering. Actually, a lot. Actually,
Yeah.
more often than not. And I'm not saying that you have to suffer to grow and learn, but I think because the nature of suffering taps so deeply into our primal emotions and fears, specifically shame,
Yeah.
it has a very profound way of pulling us out of ourself and getting us to reflect almost as a third person looking in on ourselves. And I feel like for me, I can't speak for everyone obviously, but for me that's where the most personal growth has happened.
Yeah.
And I'm just like sitting here listening to everything you're saying, and I'm just like, it's when you said that you were diagnosed with ADHD at 40 years of age.
Yeah.
I mean, when I listen to that, and I'm listening to your story, I'm sitting here thinking, maybe I need a diagnosis. But if I had a diagnosis, like, would it really change how I'm living?
Right.
So my question for you is, now that you've had that diagnosis, okay,
Yeah.
what have you put in your place, or how has that changed the trajectory of your life?
Yeah.
At the moment,
Yeah.
where you're at?
Well, I would definitely, again, just say awareness, having the awareness of this
Like
diagnosis.
self-awareness?
Yes. Just knowing like when I'm, when I'm getting on a tangent, when I'm getting distracted, right? So distractibility is a big one. And for me, like personally, I see tasks, not time. And so an example I would give is like, let's say my bride is going to hold an open house, right? She's a real estate agent back home in Portland, Oregon. And so she's going to be gone for half the day, and the kids are doing sleepovers or whatever. And hey, I've got this morning at home. You know what's going to happen? I'm gonna get the whole main floor of the house just tidied up and just squared away, and this is going to feel great. And so early in the day, I'm doing some dishes, and I'm starting to put them away, and I have something, and I'm gonna put this in the junk drawer. Everybody's got the junk drawer, the storage room, or whatever, just like the place that's kind of like the miscellaneous file, right? I go to set that, safety pin in the junk drawer or whatever else, and I look in there, I'm like, oh my gosh, what? This is not acceptable. You know what I'm gonna do right now? I'm tired of looking at this. I'm gonna organize this junk drawer.
Spend an hour doing that.
Spend an hour, spend two, look up and realize like, oh my gosh, my wife's gonna be home in half hour, 45 minutes. and all I've gotten done is a very well-organized junk drawer, right? So
But is
that's
that a bad thing?
Well, it's not. I don't think it's necessarily good, bad, or otherwise. It's only, to me, it's only like a source of frustration if I have decided that I want to get A, B, and C complete.
So it's diverting away from your original goal.
Yeah.
Oh.
Exactly.
So now, like, if you go back to your childhood, teen years, and now, and you know, with this sort of realization and this self-realization that you have now, does it make you understand teenage Aaron a bit better?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And elementary school.
What was teenage Aaron like?
I was a tennis player as a teenager.
I can tell.
Yeah.
You got long arms, dude.
Yeah.
Why don't you surf better?
Well, that's a good question. I think I told you I've been a beginner for 25 years,
I
right?
love that.
So, yeah. But,
I'm a beginner as well then.
Yeah.
25, 30 years.
Beginner
30
mind,
years.
right? No, but you know what, Shannon, I'm going to say this out loud.
On record, Aaron.
On record, I'm going to say I'm at the very beginning phases of intermediate on my surfing, because I'm now like immediately upon realizing that I've got this wave, I'm looking down the line.
Dude,
yeah.
Listen, Corey Lopez, possibly the best surfer of all time. No. Sorry, Corey Lopez. Sorry, Jerry Lopez. I can't even say Corey Lopez.
Yeah,
Corey
yeah.
Lopez is a surfer. Jerry Lopez, excuse me.
Yeah.
Greatest surfer of all time.
He's
you know,
awesome.
Mr. Pipeline was his nickname. A quote from him. He's like surfing takes you the first 20 years just to work it all out. That's what it's like a 20-year apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Then it starts getting good.
Yeah.
It does.
Well, and I love that so many people that I've talked to about surfing say it's the hardest sport they've ever attempted, right? It's just so
variable.
dynamic. Yeah.
Dynamic, and the variables are vast.
Yeah. But in answer to your question about, you know, teenage Aaron and younger Aaron, I would say that I now have maybe just like a deeper understanding of some of the struggles that I had then, and I wouldn't change it. You know,
What were they?
You know, certainly focus. Certainly frustration associated with how much output and effort I was putting in versus the results that I was getting.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you had frustration with that.
Yeah.
But what about in terms of, okay, so you said you're very task orientated and task driven. So high school, yes, there's a lot of academic things you can do, but I know that for a fact, even back in our era, although you're slightly older than me, there was still a lot of hands-on, practical-based subjects and things you could do.
Yeah.
So like, you know, like traditionally woodwork, metalwork, carpentry of various types. We had all that at school.
Yeah.
How did you go in those subjects?
Oh, I loved that stuff, man. I loved like getting my hands into stuff, you know, and just like learning. I don't know, I've always liked that steep part of the learning curve, right? Just like, you know what, man, I'm going to try Jiu-Jitsu. That's like a recent example for me.
Yeah,
I'm going to try to learn how to snowboard. Or, you know what, Brandon, my buddy, he really likes surfing, and I can tell he gets so much pleasure. I'm gonna go try that with him. Yeah. And so that first, like that move from never done it before to established beginner, I guess, you know, it's so fun that and maybe part of it's that connection in your brain that forms those connections, like being in a different place or having a new experience. I just I get so much out of that.
So you're all about task completion. That's a Jocko thing to say. It's all about task completion.
And fundamentals, like really focusing on the fundamentals and just like...
But what happens, right, Aaron, if for reasons out of your control, you're unable to complete a task, whether it's reorganizing the drawer in the kitchen that's messy?
Yeah.
What happens to you if for some reason you can't complete a task?
Well, I would say early on, I would get very
anxious,
frustrated,
angry,
angry, feel stupid maybe, you know, like, oh my God, you know, or feel like, heaven forbid, I've let my bride down, or I wasn't there for my kids, or you know, whatever.
I love how you just refer to her as your bride. It's like, it's a really sweet thing to say, bro.
Oh, thanks, man.
It's cool, man.
It's forever.
Most
right?
people say, "Oh, my wife" or "the missus."
Oh, yeah.
But I love that, my bride. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fortunate
cool,
that way.
Man.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, not at all. It's just you know, feeling like I've let myself down, or I've let people down, or I couldn't be counted on, or
you put a lot of pressure on yourself?
I would more in the past now, and one of the things that I've really cultivated is being gracious to myself, being kind to myself, and realizing how important that is, right? And how the way I feel moment to moment really matters. And it's not just this, oh yeah, I'm feeling frustrated, but I just got to keep grinding away here. I just got to keep grinding away. And just like how detrimental that is to me and my relationships.
Dude, and I'm learning it's actually causing that whole philosophy of like, I've just got to be tough and grind it out. And I'm actually realizing that causes more harm, especially now as a husband and parent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't believe you said being kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's been a big part of my story. You know, and in some ways it's served me well. It's made me like achieve things.
Yeah.
It pushed me and driven me. And, but I think it's been to the detriment of relationships, whether they're personal or professional.
Yeah.
But also to my mental health.
Yeah.
You know, and now I'm starting to guard it a lot more heavily, you know. And
yeah.
What am I trying to prove by grinding it out?
Right.
You know?
And what's the downstream effect of that, right? Like let's say you do grind it out and you're thinking, well, I'm doing this for my bride, I'm doing this for my kids. And then later your bride or your kids have some very solid feedback on how whatever it was that you did could have been done differently or could have been done better to their way of thinking. If you have just ground it out and put yourself through this kind of negation of what you're feeling and you were grinding it out for them, that's the way you framed it, and then they have this feedback for you, are you going to take that on and say, oh, you know, I'm really glad that you've helped me with this. I'm going to apply that next time. Maybe you're more inclined to feel resentful, right? You've built resentment. Like, totally. You don't know how hard I worked on this.
I did it recently.
What I put myself through to do this for you, and I didn't go surfing because of this, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, maybe you should have gone surfing. I use that exact
example.
Yeah, yeah. Because it matters how we feel all the time. Yeah, all the time.
Totally,
it's so important. Totally. And if we take care of ourselves, right? If we have that awareness, if we care about ourselves and how we're feeling moment to moment, and we give ourselves what we need, be that.
Do you think you have to be selfish? You almost have to be selfish about that?
You can call it selfishness, or you can call it self-love, or you can call it self-care, or you can call it self-awareness. I think there's a lot of different ways to frame that. But when I think of the word selfish, for me, it just kind of has a negative connotation. Like, that's just somebody that only cares about themselves.
Okay.
But I would say if you do care about yourself and how you're feeling and what your needs are and what builds you up, then what happens? Like, you feel better. Like, right? You feel more expansive. You feel more creative. Mm. And when we take care of ourselves, then we can take care of each other.
And it's so important when you have people relying on you. And I think being, I guess, for lack of a better term, the man of the house.
Yeah.
You know, I often feel pressure from that.
Mm-hmm.
That I've got this young family counting on me.
Yep.
And I automatically equate it with, okay, well, I've got to make sure they're housed and fed.
Yep.
And provided for in everything they want.
Yeah.
You know? And then I think that's it. That's all I'm really required to do as a male in this situation.
Yeah.
But I'm actually realizing that yes, those things are important, but it's actually I'm starting to feel like it's not just my burden to carry. You know, I feel like it's a share. Those feelings are real, mm-hmm. but it's shared with my partner.
Yeah.
And I don't just have to. I think it's almost like it's very self-centered to go, well, that's all my problem. No, but I'm starting to surrender, pull my ego aside, and go, okay, like let's share this together. And the quality of who I am as a person is having the biggest impact on my children.
Yeah.
They don't care that I have a bachelor's degree in education. They don't care that I own a house. They don't care that I can surf or skate or whatever I'm in. They don't really care.
Right.
They just want to know dad's happy
Yeah.
and kind to them.
Yeah.
And when I'm not happy, like my daughter's at that age now, if I'm sad about something, they're so intuitive. She feels that vibration, and she'll come up to me. Oh, when I'm sick.
Yep.
She's like, Daddy, are you sick? Yep. And she'll come and she'll give me a drink, and she's really worried about me.
Yeah, they take it all
They
in.
take it on.
Yeah.
So I'm now more, again, I can't believe you're actually raising those points about self-care. I haven't prioritized it enough. And I don't know if it's because I'm in my early 40s and maybe having a midlife crisis, which I don't actually like the term midlife crisis anymore. I feel like it has got negative connotations associated with it. But I think I'm just at a level of maturity now where I'm realizing the power and the destructive power of my own ego.
Yeah.
And how that is impacting on other people, especially the ones I love the most.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, I've got to look after myself.
Maybe instead of midlife crisis, we can use mid-course correction, right? Like I heard
that sounds so military. That's such a firefighter thing to say.
Yeah, guilty. But I heard this statistic some years ago that like when a rocket goes to the moon, let's say, it's correcting like 97% of the time. It's just like
it's off course.
It's off course. I got to correct a little bit. I went too far this way. It's just like always doing that. And if we just give ourselves some grace and realize that we're going to make a million mistakes and just be okay with that, because there's no perfect people, but care enough about how we are feeling to do the things that we need to do for ourselves to feel good day to day, then of course that's going to benefit everyone around us. And just that ripple on the pond, right? Like I feel good, and it makes me a better friend to you. It makes me a better member of our school community. It makes me a better husband, a better dad.
You're very approachable. You're very approachable, Aaron.
Oh,
you do, man. It's a compliment for you. Like I kind of feel like you're one of those dudes that walks into a room and everyone just goes, everyone feels relaxed.
Oh,
you bring that, bro. I mean that.
Good.
Because there's definitely people that walk into a room and you feel like all of a sudden my back straightens up and I feel the tension. Better watch what I say here.
Yeah.
So I'm probably that person sometimes that walks into a room and makes people feel like that.
Yeah, my family reminds me of my furrowed eyebrow. Like as a relaxed posture, especially like I'm looking down at a computer or something, my eyebrows can come down. I'm getting some years now.
I'm glad we got that on video.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got that's like it's almost like Blue Steel.
Right.
Like Zoolander. Have you seen that movie?
Well, thanks for that. Ben Stiller is a super handsome guy. All-time classic. Yeah, so
remember that movie Zoolander?
Oh, yeah, so good.
Dude, he had the look, Blue Steel.
Brilliant.
That's what that looked like.
Brilliant. He had a couple others, too. I think he was like Magnum or something. I can't remember. But
Magnum.
Brilliant.
Well, he wouldn't release Magnum until the very end.
Right? Yeah, then we had to.
It's his superpower.
Yeah, superpower.
What's your superpower?
I think if I have one, it's that you were talking about energy and walking into the room, and I think if I have one, it's that truly I'm always looking for the best in people. Like I'm expecting that.
Yeah, you are.
I come in. I think I might have told you a story. I was driving down the road. This is a year ago. I'd have to check the time frame, but I was driving down the road. It was during the time that in my birth country there was a lot of like family separations happening at our southern border, and it just hurt my heart. Just as a dad,
Yeah.
And I thought, like, God dang, man, like if President Trump had not been born to a wealthy real estate developer and instead had been born in, call it El Salvador, and a war-torn country, and he truly felt that the only way he could save himself and his daughter was to cross a couple of other countries and have some shot at what the United States offers. And he did that. Like, wouldn't it just rip his heart out to see his own daughter, who he seems to genuinely love, taken away from him, and he doesn't know where she is? I just like, when you become a parent, like everything is different, right? Like you see a movie and like, oh my gosh, the kid got hurt in the baseball game, and your heart hurts, right? And I'm driving down the road and I'm listening to this story about these family separations, and I'm thinking, dang, man, that is part of our human family. And what if the leader of my country had that mindset? And then I thought, well, if that's true, then this person in the car next to me is also part of my human family. And I looked over at the person in the car next to me, and I thought, that's my family. And it just for the rest of that day, I was kind of going through the day, and I was thinking, that's my family. That's my family. He's my family. She's my family. And you'd see people in such a different light, right? Like you'd see someone, and you'd think, oh, that member of my family has made some decisions that are harming him or her. And I just wish they could see what I see when I look at them, you know? And then, Shannon, I thought, am I doing that with my own family? Right? And it was a gut check, because sometimes it can be the most challenging for the people that are closest to us, right? To give them that grace and to give them that benefit of the doubt, to like have that, you know, that the twinkle in the mother's eye, so to speak, where you're just like, hey, that's my kid, you know? And so I sincerely try to, if I'm with someone, to think of that person as the only person in my world right then, you know, and to just pour into them and communicate in every possible way that I can that I love and appreciate them. Yeah.
On a human level.
Yeah, on a human level. Yeah.
And it's really that simple.
Yeah, yeah, and that I'm happy to see them, and that I'm listening to what they're saying. Like, you can't fake listening, but people know. Like, if you're looking at your watch, there's a million different things that you can do to blow it with regard to listening. But man, I heard some years ago there's something called I think they called it the golden pause. I read a book on listening, and namely, someone finishes what they have said, and you pause. And then you say what it is that you want to say as a response to what they're saying, as opposed to waiting to talk, right? Yeah.
So, yeah, that was actually, I was going to ask you the question. Yeah, do you listen or do you wait to speak? And obviously, I think you're someone that actually is listening, not just waiting for their turn to talk.
I'm definitely listening.
And you're working on it. No, I don't think anyone does it perfect, obviously.
No, there are times when I'm waiting to talk, because I got some really cool stories and some like sayings memorized, and like I've read some cool books and stuff, and I want to share that stuff. But when you wait and you just listen, then you learn everything that other person knows on the topic as they're telling it to you, and you're taking all that in, and you can add your own experience to that conversation. I think it was Nelson Mandela was talking about how his dad encouraged him. You know, his dad had been in a number of, I don't want to get this wrong, but let's say that Nelson Mandela's dad had a leadership role in his community. And part of that leadership role was sitting in community with other community members, and everyone has their thoughts to share on a specific topic, right? And let's say there are 10, 12, 15 people in the room, and everybody's kind of going around, not necessarily one after the other in clockwise or counterclockwise, but just everybody sharing their thoughts. Nelson Mandela's dad encouraged Nelson Mandela to go last. And in so doing, you'd have an opportunity to get a feeling for where everybody is kind of coming down on this specific topic. That's one thing. And then the second thing is, when you do speak, it carries more weight because you've considered the other people's point of view on this.
It's more considered.
Right. That
actually ties in with the saying of like, lead from behind.
Uh-huh.
And also another classic one, like, you know, listen twice as much as you speak.
Yeah.
I think they are really, like that one in particular, and what you're talking about, that I just want to go back a little bit to the story you were telling about, you know, driving down the street and looking at every person you're seeing as like part of your family.
Right.
What a great practice in empathy and love and kindness. Like, I think we could all practice that.
Oh, it's great.
And then you said something else that just resonated with me when you said that, you know, if you see someone who's, it could be maybe a drug addict in the street.
Sure.
You know, we look at them as someone that's made some bad decisions, or they're suffering, or they're unwell.
Yeah.
Because if it was your family member, that's how you would look at your family member.
Absolutely.
As opposed to if we don't know them, we often go to, and it's a protective mechanism, as we go to, they're an undesirable and we need to stay as far away from them as possible. And
Yeah.
they're a blight on our civilization. They're a bad person.
Right.
When we don't know that, they're just someone who is having a really, really hard time that needs support and help.
Yeah.
And without getting too deep into it, I mean, world leaders, it would be really, it would be good to see a lot more empathy at the base level.
Sure.
And I know, like, now that I'm living in Bali and I actually interact a lot more with people from the USA, and being from Australia, we are quite isolated from some global politics, and it's been a real learning experience for me to have conversations with people like you and others to actually really, I guess, feel and see the concern with the political climate of the USA. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And I feel it and I understand it. And
Yeah.
but I also see, again, going back to what we talked about much earlier, yes, there's some suffering, but I also see some amazing growth occurring out of that.
Yeah, contrast.
There's a collective consciousness growing.
Yeah, when you see what you don't want, it points you towards what you do want, right? And I remind myself constantly. One of my best friends and one of the smartest people I know back home told me years ago. He's like, because he was going to visit some country, I can't even remember which. And I was like, oh man, it sounds like maybe you want to watch out or something, or it sounds like things are kind of going a bit sideways there politically, etc. And he said, well, Aaron, what you have to remember is that there are whole percentages of countries and populations that are not represented by their government, right? And so just because you have a leader that is white doesn't mean everybody in your country likes white people or black people or they're outspoken in a negative way towards one race. That doesn't mean that everybody in that country is a racist. It's just like, hey, they're an extension of that human family, and maybe they correct that the next time it's time to go vote.
It's funny, someone I spoke to yesterday, she said that's how she lives her life. She's actually stopped setting goals. It's especially long-term goals. She said she just moves through life making a series of corrections and sidesteps and towards what's feeling right and what's sitting with her moral compass. So her moral compass is guiding her, and then she makes a series of corrections. And she actually used the word, she's like, ninja moves.
Yeah.
Like to ninja around them to move her in the direction that is sitting right with her morals and values. I was like, that's rad. Yeah. Because I feel like I've been told for so long that I should be setting goals and achieving objectives and I feel like a rat on a wheel.
Yeah, you absolutely
I'm exhausted.
can, right? And it's that we started up earlier on talking about past and future, right? And like, let's say you set a goal to have a certain amount of money in the bank, and you want to have that certain amount of money in a year or whatever, and you hit that, you do it. Well, are you then 100% happier than you were before you hit that goal? Or was one of the parts of that setting that goal thinking, well, I'll be happy then? Because this is a trick that I think gets played on a lot of people. They think, well, all right, when I graduate, then I'll be happy. Okay, now when I get into that relationship, then I'll be happy, right? When I buy a house, then I'll be happy. And you just keep moving the finish line for yourself, and it's like, no, you know what the best time to be happy is? Right now.
Because it's now. It's all you've got.
It's all you've got. Yeah. This moment is your life. And man, is that ever hard to take sometimes? But man, I read this great book not long ago, and it was talking about that expression that we all know, I think, therefore I am. Yeah. It's like, nah, you can just get rid of that first part. If you just are, like, you are the perceiver behind that thinking.
And you're enough.
Yeah. And you're perfect. Yeah. And you're loved.
Oh, Aaron, man. Dude, that's profound. I love it. It's been an epic conversation. It's been like an hour and 23 minutes, man.
Wow. Awesome.
Can't shut you up, bro.
I've got some thoughts to share. Thanks, Shannon. It's my pleasure. Time goes by fast when you're having fun, right?
Dude, I love it. I mean, like, I I always come to these podcasts with a bit of a plan, you know, but very willing to throw that plan out the window, you know. But I just really love how it's taken more of a philosophical sort of turn, you know.
Yeah.
I was actually sitting here going, I want to hear about this, and like I want to hear the timeline of your life, you know, which you can still do.
Sure.
But I like this direction better.
Oh, that's excellent, man. Yeah,
because
I'm here for you.
I kind of see like we're two dudes, and I'm picking up on a theme here and in Australia and other countries I've been to. Sorry, that it seems like a lot of dudes are struggling with a lot of these same concepts that we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, you're talking about ADHD. I mean, I firmly believe that I'm probably undiagnosed ADHD. And then I've, you know, devised strategies for coping and managing in this world that I'm being forced to live in.
Yeah.
And the society and the structures of this society that I didn't have a choice in. So it's just really healing even for me to hear it, and I really hope other people hear it and feel that same sort of healing power.
Yeah.
Just through your sheer honesty.
Yeah. Well, I would just add that, like, when we first met, I was reading that book by Brene Brown, right, Daring Greatly, which is like, it's the title is based on one of my all-time favorite speeches by President Theodore Roosevelt. It's and he's talking about how it's not the critic who counts, right? It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles. It makes me a little emotional even to talk about, but he talks about how there is no moving forward without failure, right? And we have somehow, I think as men, unfortunately, been told or received messages that you have to be the strong one. You have to be the stoic one. You have to be the one that never cries, never shows emotion. That these are all things that point to weakness. And that book was so lovely because it talked about vulnerability as strength. And when you see somebody get up in front of people and speak, and you can tell they're nervous, like, man, you got this.
Speak their truth.
Yeah, you can do, and it's difficult. They're doing something that's scary. That's what is so admirable, and you can see that by being vulnerable, they're not being weak. They're being brave. It's brave. And you talked about shame earlier, and there's, you know, that can come from it too. Just like this disconnect between what it is that I'm feeling and what it is that I've been taught that I have to project as a man in this lifetime or in this place, etc.
It's a paradox.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a paradox that, like, paradoxically, vulnerability is strength.
Yeah. Definitely. And I feel like when we're vulnerable, like when I say to my bride, like, hey, I can feel myself starting to get kind of defensive right now, or I can feel myself starting to feel even some anger here. And I think what it is I'm just confused. I just don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to help. And so, you know, I have really struggled in my lifetime in personal relationships with anger, like especially like what would seem like sudden explosive anger, right? And
is that a learned behavior?
I think to a degree, yes. But what happens when I'm in that place? It's so uncomfortable for me, and it's scary for my wife, and it's scary for my kids. It's scary for me. And I feel like it's like the number one threat to my relationship and being the father that I truly want to be. And so the way that I kind of get out in front of that is by hitting the pressure release valve. And for me, that looks like, hey, you know, I just need to step away for a second. Like I care about you so much, and I don't know how to phrase this. And I feel like from where I'm sitting right now, I can't be the husband I want to be right now. I can't be the dad I want to be right now. So I'm going to go and I'm going to walk around the block, or I'm going to go and I'm going to just sit quietly for 5 minutes, you know.
That's a strategy that you use.
Yeah. And
what other strategies do you have?
So I would say that a strategy that's been helpful for me is getting up early in the morning, and that's something I've just taken on in the last several years. I started listening. You mentioned Jocko Willink earlier, and I started listening to his podcast, and I've got such a man crush on Jocko anyway, because so many of the things that he talks about, surfing, jiu-jitsu, leadership, just like discipline equals freedom, all of these things that are kind of at the core of Jocko resonated with me. And my morning probably looks a lot different from Jocko's, but I do get up at, 4:30 in the morning each morning. And the first thing that I do is I sit quietly in meditation for 20 minutes. And I just use the Headspace app, it's on your phone. It's great. And it's just enough guidance for me on that. And that's lovely. So 20 minutes of just quiet stillness, letting the sand kind of settle to the bottom of the bucket of water mentally. And then immediately after that, I stretch. I've had some challenges with my back, so I'll stretch kind of pretty much yoga-like for 15, 20 minutes, and that feels really good. And honestly, Shannon, by then, it's almost time to go wake up my 2 teenage daughters, and rather than just knocking on their door, I actually go in and I play a 5-minute Headspace app.
Do you?
Yeah. So it's quiet, and I'm like
dad.
laying down in between their beds on my yoga mat. Hey, girls, I got a meditation for us. It's so lovely. And it's the same meditation I just did on 20 minutes. So it's got this like really positive message before it, then the meditation. So then when I'm done with that, I come in, make some tea and coffee for myself, tea for my bride, and some lemon water for her. And so honestly, part of that is like that first hour of the day for me is there's some me time there. There's some self-care there. And then if the whole rest of the day goes off the rails, which sometimes days go off the rails, emergencies aren't planned, right? I've made a deposit into my emotional bank account, so that feels good.
Love that.
Yeah.
A deposit into your emotional bank account.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a saying I like, if you win the morning, you win the day.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's good
for
too.
me, morning routines are just crucial.
Yeah.
It's taken me many, many years, but I've finally become aware enough to identify that I do not function well in the mornings. I don't. I just wake up with this monkey mind that goes very negative very quick. And not only just the mind stuff, but physically, it's like the sleep hormones seem to stay longer. My wife, for example, can just bounce out of bed and she's ready to go and she can think clearly and make decisions.
Wow.
I can't make decisions for the first hour or two of a day.
Yeah.
And my mood is very low. I feel like I've just got this huge monkey on my back and thinking about every single thing that's negative in my life and the world.
Yeah.
And I think that all of those things are trying to get me.
Right.
So again, very similar to you. I've got some strategies. I don't like to call them techniques, but strategies. Very big on stretching first, and then I transition into some Wim Hof breathing, deep breathing, and holding your breath.
Yeah.
And then if I've got time before the kids wake up, which is usually at 5:30 a.m., so I just get this hour. Yeah, I'll work out, do some chin-ups.
Yeah.
Get the blood flowing and feel strong.
I like that expression. If you want to get out of your head, get into your body. And moving our bodies, there's something there. We were talking about swimming earlier and that whole left, right thing. My bride spent her first 3 years of her life living in Africa. And so her first passport picture is of her mom holding her, like the baby Aaron. And when they arrived in Botswana, so this is just up to the north of South Africa, they were living in a home with a earth floor. And because of that, her mom didn't let her crawl on the floor. But it turns out, right, of course, that whole, left, right, that crawling is like this developmental thing that happens in babies where it's like there's something about our brain that wants that left, right. Swimming has it, right? And so I'm not kidding. My mother-in-law used to encourage my wife to crawl, like as an adult, just like, she always regretted that she didn't let Aaron crawl. But yeah, there's those, it doesn't have to be, what were we talking about? It doesn't, like the 5-minute walk that you do take is better than the marathon that you don't run.
Oh,
right?
totally. Like, yeah, something is better than nothing.
Absolutely.
You know, and for me now, it's prayer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because, and it's funny, like my whole life I've been surrounded by various religious denominations and spirituality of different kinds, and I've always been really just like, oh, get that stuff away from me, you know, like I don't believe in God or anything. And then, ironically, the way I've sort of come to more of a sense of spirituality and finding my own spirituality was actually from being a PE and health teacher in Australia. And I was teaching one day, and with my grade 12 students, we look at, you know, government and world health policies. And we start referring to this organisation called the World Health Organization, which actually assists governments in developing health policies for their countries.
Yeah.
And they actually list this thing called the 5 dimensions of health, which is a holistic approach to health. And governments need to consider all of these factors when budgeting for health-related initiatives in their country, you know, hospitals and medical services and support networks and stuff like that. So they identify 5 dimensions of health, which are physical, very obvious, social, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual. Is that 5? Yeah, that's 5.
That's 5.
And like, so, you know, this is an organisation that has done profound research on health and through various studies with leaders in health, doctors, all sorts of consultants, and they list the sincere importance of having an element of spirituality in your life.
Yeah.
Now, that can take many forms. For me, religion, I don't resonate with any, I guess, dogmatic religions.
Right.
But I do now, for the first time in my life, acknowledge that there's a higher power, whether it be, some people call it the spirit of the universe, some people call it God, Allah, Buddha, whatever.
Doesn't matter.
I feel like it's all very similar. Yeah. So since I actually had this, I guess you'd call it epiphany. I really do believe in a higher power now, and I pray to that higher power. And and it was this surrendering and relinquishing control of my life, and wow, doesn't that feel good?
Yeah,
you know,
so good.
So I don't have to worry as much. I have anxiety, life anxiety that occurs, but it's not like it used to be.
Yeah.
You know, and I do. I get up and I pray to my higher power, my version of it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And but it's I wish, in a lot of ways, I wish I had this realization, but earlier on in life. But I guess it's my journey, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And we're just going to the second half here, right? Like how many great movies have you seen that are kind of sports oriented, and you know, the team's down, the team is down, and they go into the locker room and there's the coach and they give this amazing speech, and man, but it's like they're tearing the paint off the lockers, getting back out there for the second half. That's us, man. We're going to the second half right now.
We are, man.
Yeah. And you know, the thinking mind is an amazing thing. It can do so many things, but the thinking mind is not going to manufacture us into happiness or contentedness, right? You talked about the ego earlier, and I really believe, regardless of, like you said, what you want to call it, that when you strip away everything, what's left is love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
Dude, that's almost a rad way to end.
We're made out of love.
Dude.
Yeah. Your love.
I can't believe
love.
My mum said this.
We're all love.
Dude, my mum said this the other day. I was asking her some advice on something, and she said, because I'm sorry, I think my mum's the wisest person in the world. But and I am very biased with that. And she said, just remember, Shannon, that love, she said, her words were, love covers a multitude of difficulties. And I was like, oh, Mum.
Yeah.
Mum.
Yeah.
Good call. And you've just said it as well. Good in no call. Uncertain terms.
Well, you know, I want to give a quick referral to the movie that I watched with my bride the other night called It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood with Tom Hanks playing Fred Rogers.
Is this a new movie?
New-ish, yeah. I think it came out last year. And Fred Rogers was a host of a children's television show on public television back home. And I always loved Fred Rogers as a kid, just like the pace was slow, intentionally slow. And you see, there's even a podcast called Finding Fred, which I also highly recommend. But man, I just cried for 2 hours, just tears of joy, because here's a guy who was an ordained minister, and in all those years of his show, never said the word God one time. Never one time. Because he was just living it, right? And like you talked about prayer earlier, I love that. I think it's an Eckhart Tolle quote. He says, if the only prayer you ever say is thank you, right? That's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Dude,
So what a
simple.
Yeah, what a great time together, Shannon. I really appreciate you having me here.
Dude, it's so good. But I've just got one little burning thing I want to add to
for sure.
everything you've been saying. Like, just going back to us as men, and you were talking about these, like, you know, outbursts of anger, which I think I've had, definitely. I mean, a lot of people have. And it just reminded me that, you know, we have this really powerful hormone and drug running through our body called testosterone.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel if we go back to our primal origins, that, you know, that was there to help us hunt and fight saber-toothed tigers.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it was there for we've been given it for a purpose.
Yep.
You know, and it's powerful. It can be dangerous.
Yeah.
But it needs to be licensed. It needs to be controlled. It needs to be managed.
Yeah. Like electricity, right?
Oh man, it's real, bro.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but dude, it's been epic. It's been now. God, Aaron. Dude, hour and 39 minutes. But I'm not keeping. I don't like to keep time, but
no.
I just like
goes quick.
Dude, I love it. But listen, is there anything else you want to finish on? I think you've said some amazing stuff, especially the one about love.
Yeah, well, I would say, and this is very connected to the love part, and running the risk of getting choked up again for the 8th time on your podcast, Shannon. I wanted to encourage your listenership to get a kid out into nature if possible, and that's something that has been hugely important in my life. I was really lucky to have my grandpa Tanner, who was a United States Marine, fought on Iwo Jima, saw some terrible things, and came home to start a family and really poured himself into his family. And when I was a little boy, from the age of 3, my grandpa started taking me fishing. And my dad, very hardworking man, tradesman, worked on cars, front end brakes and alignment. He didn't have that skill set, and he didn't have that. Time was difficult for it to come by, and just as a priority, he wanted to do other things with his Saturday. So here's my grandpa Tanner stepping in and taking me fishing, and man, I can just remember, like, as a kid sitting by the campfire. We've got lines in the water. We've got bells on the end of our on the end of our rods. So we're fishing, even though we're sitting by the campfire. Right? A bell rings. That's the sound of excitement. My heart just started beating faster. Anyway, I remember my grandpa handed me this little can in my hand and a fork, and he had taken the top off the can, and I looked down, and it's like, what is this that I'm seeing? Grandpa, what is this? He says, that's Vienna sausage. And they're like these little processed meats stuffed in a can. I've never tasted anything so delicious, you know. And, you know, as a kid, just to have that experience of being surrounded by nature, being with someone I loved, sleeping on a cot in the van,
catching food,
catching fish. You know, I caught a little grief from Grandpa for swimming in the fishing water, you know, classic kid move, but it just meant so much. And I think a lot of times when it comes to like fishing or hunting or time in the outdoors, that only happens if a young person has someone in their life that is willing to take them and do those things.
Agreed.
Yeah. And so I'll give a guideline. You could think about taking someone fishing, like out on a boat or something. If they're 3, don't let it be more than 3 hours. If they're 4, don't let it be more than 4 hours.
Remember that.
Yeah, and it's important that they catch fish the first time too. So take them to like a stocked pond.
Because then it can go. It's like you don't want them to have a negative association either.
That's right.
Like
snacks are important too.
Like wilderness survival.
Yeah, snacks are important.
So yeah, well, you've sort of beat me to that because with my show, Terrible Happy Talks, I ask all my guests to come with a cause.
Yeah.
And some of the guests are just coming with like the most amazing causes, and I will put links in the show notes of their episodes and your episode, so we can start to spread and give people an opportunity to be of service to the world, and support charities or organisations or ideas that's going to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
I'm a dreamer. I want to make the world a better place.
For sure. We can do it. Like we
can do it.
We were talking about mid-course corrections earlier, and
let's do it.
Hey, we got this one planet, and I think there's a river back home that is like such a big part of my heart called the Deschutes River, and I read this book about the Deschutes River some years ago by an author named Scott Richmond. Amazing, so good. And he said in the intro, he's like, I have a number of friends that would rather I didn't talk so much about the Deschutes because they think, well, there'd be more fishermen out here, there'd be more competition, but whatever. And he said, but I feel the opposite. I feel like when a river has many people that love it, then that river has many defenders. Right? And so if you know nature, if you realize that it's not this other thing, that we are nature, and that we've only artificially closed ourselves off to that part of our hearts and the importance of the natural world that we are part of. We are part of it. We've evolved in it, and we've been living a lot longer as a species, very closely tied into and aware of and a part of like those cycles in nature. And then sometimes you just feel that. And the more you can get a kid out, man, the greater the likelihood that they're going to feel a little bit of that too. And more is caught than taught, right? You don't have to say, Jesus created all of this, or you explain it or anything. You just get them out there and they'll have their experience.
Osmosis.
Yeah.
Absorption.
Exactly. Immersion.
What I might do then is I might link the Village First Responder Organisation to your episode.
Sure.
They also run international wilderness first responder courses, which I know is very close to your heart.
For sure.
And empowers people to take control of health and emergency situations and disaster management and community building and harm minimization as well, which I think is really crucial.
And to encourage everyone to be one of the helpers, right? Like it feels so good to just be able to say, okay, well, this person is...
Don't be a bystander.
Don't be a bystander. This person has had some catastrophic injuries, but are they breathing? Yes, they're breathing.
Yeah.
Do they have any life threats from bleeding? Yeah. Yes, they do. And like having that sequence of, man, it feels so good.
And it could be one of these people that we talked about, like someone who's our family members or someone that's very close to us. So it's very, very profound and necessary, bro.
For sure. Great skills.
Yeah, man. So, listen, dude. Now, I'm a one-man show, Terrible Happy Talks, me, but I'm also now accompanied to a few of my episodes with the lovely Christina, the photographer. She is shooting this episode, and you can go and see her work at christinathephotographer.com. She takes beautiful photos, and she'll be taking a beautiful portrait of Aaron today.
Oh, wow.
And she's also videoed this episode. So thank you, Christina. You're an absolute legend, and I love having you on set. But I'm generally a one-man show, and I'm growing. I'm growing slowly, and I want to give all my guests a gift. And at the moment, it's humble. But I just got to get it out of my bag. I've got a little gift for you.
Oh, you have to do that?
I know. I just want to... Okay, I'm just going into my bag. One day I'll get organised and have it ready to go.
Man, I love that we have the same backpack. Shout out to Patagonia.
Sustainability.
Yeah.
Sustainability.
Let my people go surfing.
Dude, I live out of this thing, literally.
Yeah.
Every day.
It's the best.
So much heavy usage.
Yeah.
And again, I'm like you, I'm drawn to those things that... Those little decisions about even a backpack where, it can have a profound experience on the environment.
Yeah.
Why not?
Amazing company.
Okay, so here's my gift, right? It's the Terrible Happy Talk Circle logo sticker.
Sweet.
This is for alumni only, so only people that have been on the show get one of these stickers.
Boom.
And so, yeah, bro, thank you for being on the show. There's your alumni sticker.
Wow.
If you see other people with this sticker, it's because they've been on the show.
And I know. It's like the secret handshake right here.
But one day, Aaron, I'm going to get you back on the show, and it's going to be something like, I don't know, like a Porsche, a car.
I do like
I'll
those.
give you a house. You know, that's how big we're going to be.
Whatever it takes. It won't make us happy, right? It's not the outside stuff. It's the stuff going on inside, right?
Oh, dude, see, you've got me good there. You're right. It's not about the
That
stuff.
sticker means a lot, man. Thank you. I
Has
really
stuff ever
appreciate
made
it.
you happy? Has stuff ever made you happy?
Very temporarily.
What about that surfboard sitting behind you there?
Makes me happy to look at it. Yeah. The Bonga Perkins, the 9.8, the big old Hawaiian shape.
It's an adapter that connects you to the environment, though.
That's right.
That's what I said to my wife when I spent $1,000 on a surfboard.
Hey, you know what? There's another great quote. It's like something like a boat viewed from afar hold all men's dreams, right?
Wow.
Like, because you're just projecting onto that. And that's my boat out there, man. I paddle around in the surf with that.
It's a boot.
That boat.
That's what the Canadians would say, boot. It's a boot.
Did they say the word boat? Boot? Maybe they do. I don't know.
Who knows, man?
I'll get to the bottom of this.
Well, anyway, listen, so Aaron's episode will be, you can find it via the terriblehappytalks.com website. That's terriblehappytalks.com. Subscribe to the newsletter. I'll have all the links in there to iTunes, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and some other platforms that I've just discovered have now picked up my podcast and are dispersing it without me knowing, which I guess is a nice thing.
Yeah, that's great.
Because I do want to get the information out there. I want to spread positivity, and you've brought positivity, bro. You know, you have. And I'd really love it if you could write a review on the episode on iTunes or even connect with me on Instagram. If you send me a DM, I promise I'll reply as soon as I can. And if you've got any questions that I could even pass on to Aaron, we'll respond to you. And yeah, man, bro, high five.
Yeah.
Oh, you got an injured finger.
Good times. Yeah, we'll go left side on this one.
That was a shit high five.
Let's do this again.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Boom. All right.
Much better.
All right. Have a rad day, bro.
All right, you too.
See ya.
Thanks, bye.